Will Russia and NATO start World War III? I'm asking that question because both NATO and Russia are sending out dangerous signals. Let's start off with Russia. President Vladimir Putin has warned that his country would not rule out using nuclear weapons if its sovereignty or territory were threatened. Now, of course, this will not be the first time Putin has made such a warning. But you see, it comes after the West has allowed Ukraine to use long-range weapons to strike deep within Russia. In his first face-to-face meeting with editors of international news agencies since the Ukraine war started, Putin said the West was wrong to assume that Russia would never use nuclear weapons. He warned that the Kremlin's nuclear doctrine should not be taken lightly. When asked about the NATO chief's calls to allow Ukraine to use Western weapons to strike Russian territory, Putin differentiated between different missiles. He warned that allowing Kiev to strike Russia with ever more powerful weapons would be considered a serious escalation, drawing the West towards a war with Russia. He also outlined what a Russian response would look like in case the NATO did not pay heed to the warnings. He promised a tit-for-tat response. He said that Russia would shoot down the Western missiles. He also warned that Moscow may deploy similar high-technology long-range missiles close enough to strike the Western states.
For some reason, the West believes that Russia will never use nuclear weapons. We have a nuclear doctrine. Look what it says. If someone's action threatens our sovereignty and territorial integrity, we consider it possible for us to use all means at our disposal. This should not be taken lightly, superficially, but professionally.
But where would Putin deploy such missiles? He did not specify. But that is exactly why the Russian president's warning cannot be taken lightly. You see, Putin's statement came after U.S. President Joe Biden authorized Ukraine to launch some American-supplied weapons to target Russia. To be clear, Washington still prohibits Kiev from striking Russia with ATACMS and other long-range U.S.-supplied weapons, but U.S.'s allies in Europe are calling for the U.S. to lift the ban on Ukraine striking Russia with long-range weapons. They say that Ukraine has the right to use the weapons provided by Britain to strike targets inside Russia, and it was up to Kiev whether to do that or not. America's allies, in fact, have insisted that providing weapons and equipment to Ukraine does not make them party to the conflict with Russia. They maintain that there should be certain restrictions on their use. Last month, however, as Russian troops started advancing towards Kharkiv, Ukraine once again started to demand the relaxation of those rules. A UK-led pressure campaign in Europe eventually resulted in Washington complying with Ukraine's wishes. Now, this is what Russia would call an escalation. You see, since before the war started, Russia has outlined its red line in the war. Ukraine cannot be allowed to use Western weapons to hit Russian territory. For Russia, Western weapons being used to strike deeper into Russia would be seen as NATO's direct involvement in the war. In the 2 years, as the red line kept getting blurred, Russia kept warning the West to be careful. From arming Ukraine with Javelin and Stinger missiles, U.S. graduated to supplying HIMARS rocket launchers, then M1 Abrams tanks, and soon the coveted American-made F-16 jets will be supplied by other countries to Ukraine. For now, long-range strikes, including from ground-launched ATACMS, remain off the table for Ukraine, a sign that the Biden administration is still wary of avoiding a direct conflict with Russia. But with the latest green light, as the NATO crossed Putin's red line? It's too soon to say. So far, the Russian president has not followed through militarily on the promises to punish the West for its support of Ukraine. But how long will Putin hold back is the real question. What are his red lines? We don't know. On Wednesday, as Putin spoke to the press, he outlined once again the Russian response to long-range strikes. According to the Russian leader, Moscow would respond in two ways. Number one, by boosting air defenses. and destroying these Western missiles. Number two, an asymmetric response. Putin said that if the West deems it possible to send such weapons to the war zone, Russia will also send similar weapons in striking distance of the West. Lastly, Putin warned that if the West continues to escalate, it will completely destroy international relations and undermine international security. Russia has framed the Ukraine war as a proxy conflict between Russia and NATO. Over the course of the war, he has referred to red lines numerous times. He has, in fact, even gone as far as suggesting nuclear action if there was an existential threat to the Russian state. Though this has been undefined, the threat still looms, at least in the eyes of the NATO countries bordering Russia. This is what prompted Russia to issue a series of threats that Moscow will attack NATO directly or use tactical nuclear weapons within Ukraine. For now, Putin has rejected claims that Moscow would want to attack NATO as nonsense, but it is precisely because Russia has made such threats so many times that it has made it easier for Ukraine's allies to cross Russia's purported red lines again and again. You see, Russia has been brazen in the war, but it has also been cautious by not directly engaging the NATO forces. He has warned, but has not escalated the current conflict beyond Ukraine's border. He also has never introduced nuclear weapons on the battlefield. But with escalation from both sides dragging out, can the conflict in Ukraine still spin out of control? Will it become World War III? Will they resort to the possible use of nuclear weapons? To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.